The firefighter sat in the quiet of the truck, his gear heavy on his shoulders, the siren still echoing in his ears. He never admitted it out loud, but every time he was called into the flames, fear came first. It wasn't the kind of fear that made him freeze, but the kind that clung to his chest, tightening with every beat of his heart. People often thought firefighters were fearless, but he knew better. He knew fear always arrived before courage did. He would picture the faces of those waiting inside the smoke-filled rooms, faces he hadn't even seen yet, and wonder if he could reach them in time. He would imagine the floor collapsing, the oxygen running out, the roar of fire swallowing everything. These thoughts came uninvited, like shadows creeping in just before dawn. And yet, when the truck stopped and the doors opened, he moved. He stepped forward not because the fear vanished, but because something stronger carried him beyond it. Fear reminded him of his own humanity. It whispered that life was fragile, that every step into the flames could be the last. And maybe, he thought, this fear was also his compass. It sharpened his eyes, quickened his senses, reminded him to respect the fire instead of underestimating it. Still, there were nights when he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking himself why the fear never faded. Shouldn't years of experience have erased it by now? He thought about his colleagues, laughing and joking as if fire was just another day's work. Did they feel the same, not inside? Or was he alone in this? That question was the heaviest of all, because it made him doubt his strength. Maybe he wasn't as brave as people believed. Maybe courage belonged to others, the ones who could run into the flames without trembling inside. Yet, every call proved something different. No matter how much fear followed him, his boots always hit the ground running. His hands always pulled the hose, his voice always shouted for his crew, and his body always pushed forward to reach those who needed saving. In those moments, he wondered if courage wasn't about the absence of fear at all, but about carrying it with him into the fire. The thought lingered, faint but steady, like a flame refusing to be extinguished. Maybe fear was not his enemy. Maybe it was the silent partner walking beside him, testing his heart every time he stepped into the blaze. There was a man he often thought about on nights when fear felt heaviest. His old mentor, Captain Harris, a retired firefighter who had seen more fires than anyone could count. When the firefighter was still new at the station, Harris had pulled him aside after a rescue that left him shaken. His hands had trembled so badly he could barely unclip his helmet. Harris had looked at him with calm, weathered eyes and said words that stuck long after the smoke cleared. Fear, Harris told him, is not weakness. Fear is the spark that tells you life matters. Courage isn't built on erasing that spark. It's built on carrying it with you, steadying your breath, and walking forward anyway. At the time, the younger firefighter had nodded politely, but deep inside, he didn't believe it. He thought real courage meant feeling nothing at all, like the heroes people wrote about in the papers. But over the years, those words began to echo louder. He started to notice things Harris had tried to teach him. In every rescue, fear showed up first, but it didn't stop him. It sharpened him. It kept him alert to the creak of weakening beams, the hiss of fire that was about to burst through a wall, the cry of someone trapped where no one else had heard. Fear was not the chain holding him back. It was the thread pulling him toward what mattered most. Sometimes, when the fear became almost unbearable, he would remember Harris's steady voice. The old captain had admitted once that he never walked into a fire without feeling the weight of fear pressing on his chest. That confession had startled him more than the flames ever could. The man he admired most, the one he thought was unbreakable, had lived with the same quiet trembling all along. It changed the way he saw himself. Maybe courage was not a clean, shining thing that existed in the absence of fear. Maybe courage was rough-edged, shaped by the very fear it carried. Without fear, there was nothing to push against, nothing to prove. Without fear, stepping forward meant nothing at all. As the firefighter carried Harris's lesson with him, he began to see the truth. Fear and courage were not enemies fighting for control of his heart. They were companions, walking side by side into every blaze. And maybe, just maybe, that was what made each rescue sacred. The night the call came, the city was wrapped in silence, broken only by the urgent crackle of the radio. A house had gone up in flames, with a family trapped inside. As the firefighter pulled on his gear, the familiar weight of fear pressed down hard, heavier than his helmet, heavier than the oxygen tank on his back. He could hear it in his own pulse, quick and uneven, like a drumbeat, reminding him of everything that could go wrong. When they arrived, the fire was alive. roaring and twisting against the night sky. The family's cries could be heard above the chaos, piercing through the crackle of burning wood. For one moment, he froze, the fear louder than the flames. But then, Harris's words returned to him like a steady hand on his shoulder. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is walking forward with fear still in your chest. With that thought, he moved. Each step through the smoke felt like walking into the unknown, but his fear no longer felt like a chain. It felt like fuel, pushing him forward. His hands shook as he broke through the door, but they were strong enough to pull the children to safety. His breath was unsteady as he carried them out, but it was deep enough to keep going back in. On his last trip inside, the floor groaned beneath him, threatening to give way. Fear surged again, sharp and merciless. But alongside it, courage rose, whispering that the people waiting inside mattered more than his trembling legs. When he finally emerged, carrying the last survivor in his arms, the night erupted in cries of relief. The family was safe, and he stood there, chest burning with smoke and fear, yet also with something brighter, something he now understood as courage. Later, as the flames died down and the night grew quiet again, he sat on the truck steps, staring at his soot-covered hands. The fear was still there, resting inside him like a constant shadow, but now, he no longer wished it away. He saw it clearly, as Harris once had, as part of the very fire that kept his courage alive. In that silence, he whispered to himself, almost like a vow. Fear would never leave him, but neither would his courage. They would walk together, every rescue, every call, until his last day in uniform. And that, he finally understood, was what real bravery meant. There are moments in life when fear feels like an unshakable weight, pressing us down until we believe we cannot move. But the truth is, courage is born in those very moments, not in the absence of fear, but in the choice to act despite it. Just as the firefighter stepped into the flames, carrying both his fear and his strength, we too can face the fires of our own lives. Fear does not make us weak, it makes us human, and when we rise with it, we discover what real courage means. If this story touched you, share it with someone who might need the reminder. And if you'd like more stories that inspire reflection and strength, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to join us here.